All right. Well, welcome to episode 6 of C.A.R.s, Coffee and Christ here in season 2. It's our weekly podcast here at Automotive Royale in Mounds, Oklahoma. My name is Ross Turner, and I serve as our host of our podcast and also our corporate chaplain here at C.A.R. In today's episode, we are celebrating love and marriage, and it's in honor of Valentine's Day. I know it's you either love it or you hate it, Valentine's Day. But I think it's a wonderful holiday, and we're excited to talk about the themes of love and marriage in this episode. And we are recording this episode before Valentine's Day, but hopefully you'll at least listen to it probably after when we upload it next week and have you listen to it. But in celebration of really a Valentine's Day week, we hope that our listeners will benefit from this discussion of love and marriage. Now, with me today are founders, Joshua King, Abigail King, with us, and we're excited to talk about these themes together. And we purposely are putting these together because God does. And the world, on the other hand, tends to isolate these things from one another. So I thought to get our discussion started today, I'd start by quoting the famous song by Frank Sinatra. And giving you the words to this song. It was written in 1956, and it goes like this: love and marriage go together like a horse and carriage. This I tell you, brother, you can't have one without the other. Love and marriage, it's an institute you can't disparage. Ask the local gentry, he'll say it's elementary. You could try to separate them, it's an illusion. You could try and you'll come to only one conclusion. I think it's really interesting that was a famous song like 70 years ago. That was a really famous song. And it's also ironic given Frank Sinatra was a womanizer as well. It's just, and then of course the song became even more famous when it became the theme song for Married with Children, which was this vulgar show that kind of mocked
popular
marriage, and it's just really interesting. Like, it was meant to stand for something very pure and good, but yet everything around it and used it also is like the complete opposite of that. So I think it kind of sets us up well to kind of talk about kind of how the world tends to treat these subject matters, right? They really are looking at it as isolated things. There's this institution of marriage over here. There's this concept or ideal of marriage over here, and they never shall come together. Like, that's kind of how the world engages it. So I thought, let's start with just the idea of love and kind of get into the discussion first here. Why does the world pursue love with such an abandon, kind of almost recklessly, it seems like? And also, why do they seem to be searching all the wrong places for it? But it just seems like no matter where you turn the TV on or listen to a song, 95% of it is about love. 95% of the stuff on television, reality television especially, there's like 10 shows about getting married and figuring out how to love somebody. And it never really works out very well, right? And then most songs are about love, right? So why is the world so fixated on the concept of love and separate it from marriage so often?
To use another famous lyric, they're hooked on a feeling.
Yes. Are we going to quote?
Yes, we are. Yeah.
It's a great song, though.
They are hooked on a feeling, and I think that's the problem, is their core definition of love.
Yeah.
And actually, when the Lord began unfolding what love actually is, for me, I realized, that's not the same as what the world would call love. Yeah, I think we've reduced love down to a feeling, which I think it could encompass, right? I think it definitely encompasses that in a portion, but love is so much more than that.
Yeah.
And I'll give you some examples. Just like, I feel like people, the feeling they have towards someone of adoration, I would say, is how the world defines love.
Yeah.
Like, I'm in love with this person. When they're saying that, is just, I have this feeling that I can't get away from. Right. And it may be that they have a soul tie to that person. It may be that they're connected to that person in some spiritual way that they don't really understand. Yeah. There's a lot of things that they don't understand about, it could be a lust thing, and it's not actually love. That's another feeling. So there's that getting it just into a feeling allows the enemy to kind of shift you in a whole bunch of ways. Yeah. And the world loves those feelings. Back in Scripture, I think the source of a lot of, especially for women, it goes back to Eden, and, and goes back to Eve. And you will long after your husband as one of the things that the Lord said as, after they ate the fruit, right? And so there's this like that going on. That is something that the world doesn't understand. That's in and tied to that, which I think is why a lot of our music follows that same vein. But then you kind of like start to unpack, okay, well then what is it? And I think the world, when you reduce it down to a feeling, then you miss and are easily manipulated by it, controlled by it, or mismanaged by it, right? Because, emotions and feelings are terrible managers of your life. And I had to learn that the hard way early on. Do you have any?
I mean, I think that, feelings are fleeting, and that's why you see a lot of people that'll say, well, I fell out of love, or, you see people that end relationships once the honeymoon phase is over.
Yes.
Because that excitement isn't there anymore, that lightning bolt attraction and all that stuff that is new and exciting starts to become familiar. And familiar isn't exciting, and therefore if you become familiar and comfortable, then you think, oh, well, am I still in love? Because they are equating love with that feeling, that initial attraction. And I mean, we're so easy to throw around that word,
There seems to be like saying like a misdiagnosis of what love is, right? There also seems to be this kind of reducing of love to something that's really too simplistic. I think primarily. And then also the reality that most people are kind of being misinformed. I kind of think that last part of, I just think people are getting promised a lot by this that are just, it can't deliver, right? I think that's part of the issue. Like if you keep trusting things that can't deliver, you're going to keep failing at it, and, if you're on your 7th marriage or your 20th, dating relationship and nothing's changing, like maybe something's wrong, but people keep getting misinformed and kind of believing in false promises. They keep producing love to feelings maybe, or just one feeling or excitement, right? Confusing love with lust or attraction. Just because you're attracted to somebody doesn't mean that they're a good, suitable partner for you, right? So like they're really a lot of confusion, I think, because there's this kind of oversimplification, right? We can say, I love my animal. I'm about to get a cat today. I love my pet.
I love pizza.
We love, but obviously there's different kinds of love, that really show how complex love is, right? And I think we got to make sure that we understand, whereas that's not typically talked a lot about, right? It's either romantic love, sexual love, or nothing, right? And like there's friendship, there's brotherhood, there's just, kindness, right? There's a lot of these other kinds of forms of love that are just as valid in many ways, but just, kind of removed from people's thought. So again, I think there's a oversimplification, maybe over-promising and reducing things to feelings, and you're just getting a lot of broken-hearted people, right? That are just scarred and really hurt, but keep after it, so it doesn't quite make sense to me. That way. So that's kind of, I thought we'd start with that. But, on the other side of it, for those that go to church, have grown up in church, we hear a lot about commitment, right? Commit to God, commit to Christ, commit to church, commit to marriage, right? And we get these ideas that love is only this commitment, right? Or duty, right? This kind of moral responsibility. Why, while that is very true and good, right? How does that fail to cultivate love and to cultivate marriage? Because there's a lot of people that are just living together that are married. And again, we want to honor that. There's something honorable about that. But that's not the same thing as cultivating love either, right? So where does that kind of fall short too? By honoring the institution, but really also kind of leaving, in many ways, the cultivation of love out of it. What do you all think about that?
Well, I think what's important about that too is like when to shift your mindset of duty or obligation, because if that's your only mindset, then what is separating your marriage from any other relationship.
That's right.
You know, like, are you viewing your spouse in the same way that you are viewing a roommate from college? Right?
Maybe, yeah.
If it's just an obligation, if it's just a duty, then I just feel like the Lord wants so much more for you.
Yes. Yeah, and I think the main problem with that, you're reducing it down to kind of an agreement or a contract.
Yep.
Like, hey, I agreed to this, and that goes a long way in honor cultures. I would say in the East, like duty and is like really super central to how they're raised.
Yes.
But it is not sufficient, because really at the foundation of love is character.
Yeah.
And you will not encapsulate that in that. And to be able to actually achieve love, right, is character. Yeah. And it kind of misses the whole, I would think, premise of how the Lord describes love and what love actually is. And so it cheapens it to a piece of it. Yeah. Is it commitment? Yeah. Yeah. Like there is, a commitment of God to his people, but the covenants he makes are not his love. They're a result of his love.
Yep.
They are an outcome and a decree, if you will, of his love. But they are not his love. Does that make sense? And so again, we're kind of like the enemy has a tendency to quarantine us into a lesser version and sell us on a lesser version of the truth or a lesser version of the outcome in order to rob us of the full wealth.
That's great, Josh. I think you all are both right. I think there's a sense of, the church has a danger of reducing as well, right? When we over focus on it as a moral duty or just a moral choice, that's part of it. Absolutely. And it's a foundational piece of it. So it's more correct, but it's not the only thing. And it can also fall into the sense of basically you're treating your spouse like kind of a really important chore, if we're really being honest, right? Or just another line item on the family business, right? And so there is a danger here of really missing what God's really offering here. And just in honor shame cultures, it's very high, regard there for sure, but it struggles on the other side of like cultivating. A garden doesn't look like a bunch of, straight, sticks in the ground. It looks like this beautiful teeming flowers and life, and it's very flourishing. I think marriage is meant to be that. It takes a lot of work when we talk about that, but like that's really what it's meant for. And I like what you said, Josh, about how the contract. We use the word covenant in the Bible. It is a product of God's love, right? There's a legal piece to it, which is beautiful. That God says legally, I'm binding myself to you. That's why He calls it marriage. So it's not just I have a feeling about you, right? He's like, look, I'm binding myself to you, right? That's why I send my spirit into your heart. So, but it is the product of His. He, sets His affection is really what the Bible's saying. Like He puts His eye upon us. Like it's kind of incredible. So it's a lot more than just like I commit myself to you, right? It's so much more than it's like I set my affection upon you. You're the apple of my eye. Like that's kind of how the Bible talks about it. So there's something that's right about that infatuation in a sense, but it can't only be that. And there's something right about that commitment, but it can't only be that. There's something much more than that. Those are included. So I think why it's so hard is because it's more than those things. And we have to kind of let God define that for us a little bit. But I found also in culture kind of a weird phenomenon I'd love to get your thoughts on before we kind of move forward here, is that even though the culture that we're in is all about love, no marriage, these folks keep getting married. It's just really weird to me. Like, I'm like, so you hate marriage, you're calling it a social construct, you think people just came up with it to like, enslave women or basically to keep status quo in society, but yet you folks keep getting married. They just keep getting married. And so why do people keep getting married if they're hating on marriage so much and all they really want is love, not, accountability? So why do you all, I don't know the answer for that. I'm simply saying, why is this continuing to happen when people are like, this is an outdated thing? Well, and, it's just weird to me.
they're hooked on a feeling.
That's kind of what it is, right? I don't know what it is.
I'm just but I think it's both misnomers working together.
Yeah.
So if you're addicted to love in a way, and it's another title of a song. And if you're addicted to love, which in most cases the world's, let's call it the world's definition of love. If they knew what true love was, they would really be addicted.
Yeah.
But if they but the world's version of love. Yeah. But then they don't trust each other. So then there's a need for, if I'm going to pull this person close to my life, I don't trust anyone. So I need to have a contract to protect me.
In place.
So think of like a work partnership. Like, I'm with this other company, but hey, we need a contract between us, or if I'm, and that is how the world is handling it. It is mistrust and addiction working together in a way. So you'll never lose it because they don't, you don't get that out of that system. So those constructs are being used in a way that's different to be able to accomplish something they weren't intended originally to do.
Yeah. Javi, what do you think? I mean, as a counselor and, coming from it, from more of a therapy standpoint, and what do you think? Why do people jump into marriage? Because, you'll see people go from, I've dated all my life, I can't do this right, and then they just get married the next day. So again, they're honoring marriage in a way still. Why do you think they do this?
I think a lot of people want safety and security, and having that kind of institution provides some aspect of that, right? It gives them the security, whether, it's a false security or not, depending on how committed they are to each other. It gives them something that gives structure, that gives them that stability to say, okay, we are defining this in some way so that we're not just out willy-nilly where there's no rules. People like structure, they like rules, they like security, and the institution of marriage provides that. Even if they don't socially like it, and they don't like the construct, and they don't like everything that you mentioned earlier, still, it provides that.
That's right. Yeah, I think there's, again, this sense of this kind of rebuffing of it, but yet they see the civil benefit of it, right? They see the personal safety it provides, or some kind of level of security, and all of a sudden it becomes attractive to them in kind of weird moments of their lives, right? Or much later in their lives, strangely enough. But people kind of move from one pendulum part to the other in doing this, and it's strange in a way. But given the way that the culture is and how much they push back against marriage, you look at the stats, marriage is doing all right. People are getting married a lot. So it just shows, I think, God knows what he's doing. We're just misusing it, right? He knows what he's doing. He knows we need security. He knows we need safety. He knows we need to express love in a committed way. He wants us to do that in a safe place, but yet we're misusing it, misunderstanding it, and kind of, putting it in different places and not putting it all together, right? So again, I think it just shows by human nature, we know we need this. Right? We know we need this. Even the craziest people out there, they're like, I'm not like 65, 70 years old later in life. I'm going to get married. It's like, why now?
You see people even who absolutely hate being married to each other, yet they will stay married for the sake of children, right? Because they'll say, well, we want a stable home for the family. What is that? It is security. Right?
They see the benefit of it.
They see that benefit.
They see the benefit. And then again, they're seeing some of the benefits, so they honor it, but they're not seeing the gift giver, right? They're not seeing the one who gives it, and they're not seeing the why. And again, there's a lot having to do with ignorance, but it's also, our own proclivities to sin and things like this. And the culture isn't helping us out with this, right? But again, it just is a phenomenon I think is interesting to note. Well, as Christians, we're wanting to uphold romance and marriage, and we're wanting to put them together, right? Not keep them separate, right? We want to put them together, and there's lots of different ways that Christians attempt to do that. But I think in general, we want to put them together in marriage, dating in marriage, not just dating before marriage, dating in marriage, right? Romance in dating too, right? Not just courting, and then suddenly I'm going to get married. Like, okay, that's like a friendship, and then suddenly you married a friend. No offense, we hope they become your friend, but you need to have romance in it too, or just everyone's a potential spouse, right? Yeah. So the reality is there should be this romance and dating and marriage all kind of put together here. But I think there's a lot of myths as Christians out there that probably should be debunked as we attempt to do this. And I don't know, I thought it might be good for us to say, hey, what are some myths about marriage as Christians, pursuing dating, things like this. We're trying to do it right. But what are some myths maybe that should be debunked, or some things we should say, hey, that's not real. Like that, this doesn't work that way. Any myths you think that should be debunked as we pursue romance and marriage together as Christians, and want to honor these things together, but maybe sometimes a myth gets in the way of that.
I think we're very influenced by the media and movies and shows, and they like to define romance in a certain way.
Yeah.
And so if that's what you're used to, but you don't take into account you and your spouse's personalities and your own interests, and you're only defining it by what you've seen in the media, then you could end up being very disappointed. If all you see in movies are, hot air balloon rides and picnics on the beach, but you are the type of person, you and your spouse are we like playing video games together.
Yes. Right.
Define what is romantic based on your own interests and you as individuals. Yeah. Right? It's I love a good Korean drama, but a lot of what they have is romantic and everything. I'm okay, that's sweet, I guess. Yeah. But if Joshua were to do that to me, for me, whatever, would I have that same reaction as the actors and actresses?
Yeah.
Probably not, because we are different people.
Would not be what you're looking for.
Right.
Yeah.
I think another one is just the other extreme is the church has kind of put so many rules around things that marriage can't be fun, intimacy can't be exciting, everything is boring for Christians. Yeah. And then you go read Song of Solomon, and then you're like, whoa, okay, maybe the church.
That's right.
God,
that's only a metaphor, and the church has even made it a metaphor for that. No, it's very clearly a love poem. Pretty clearly just what it is. But there is this trying to put too many rules. I mean, you saw this with, Jesus and the Pharisees. They're just rule exhaustion that don't allow people to just love one another and have a holy marriage bed between the two of them. And I think that's something that I think also is a myth, because God designed certain things. And I think that's another one.
A big one. Yeah. I think you both are right. I think one, there's this, this conception of romance that is so powerful in culture that we've really got to be careful, because we're so desensitized to it. And we have to really disengage ourselves from that, because that can really lie a lot to us in marriage of hey, this is what I should want. I mean, if it's not this, then apparently this person doesn't love me. Right. And that's very powerful, I think. You see people on vacation that don't know each other, that are actors, and they're having the time of their lives, but the reality is vacation primarily is at an airport. Vacations primarily paying for your kids to get, healed from some medical problem they had. Vacations are about being together, not about all this romance. Right. And so there's just kind of these lies that come at us, and somehow I'm not having fun, so no, this person doesn't love me. So that's one myth that we've got to say, hey, that's a dangerous one. Right. I think the other part, like you're saying, Josh, is the Christian lie is that you shouldn't really have any fun or any enjoyment. Sex is a terrible thing. You should never think positively of it. We're sexual creatures. God made us to be sexual creatures. Sex and the sex drive is a good thing from God. It's when it's manipulated into lust. It's when it's turned against itself that it's dangerous. And the church really suffers from not understanding how sex is a part of marriage and is a beautiful part of it. Song of Solomon is not just an allegory. It is, but it isn't, right? I remember, I'll share the story before we move on. I remember doing an interview in one of my ordination discussions. That you have many of those before you get ordained. And they asked me directly if I appreciated a certain kind of Christianity that I do, called Puritanism, and that's an important, very high view of God and a very rich view of grace and all those things. But I did say to them, I said, I think they're very wrong about the Song of Solomon. Their views become the popular view. That Song of Solomon is just an allegory between Christ and his church. I say, no, it's an erotic love poem. And they all look, I had 8 pastors around me. They looked at me like I was cross-eyed. And they looked at me like this, and I said, "But it is." Yeah. And like it made them uncomfortable because they don't know that that's in there, and it's in there for a reason. Now, we all are told what it's not supposed to be, but we've got to make sure that we know what it's for as well. And it's for God's covenant, and it's for the covenant of marriage. And so when we keep it there, it should be exciting. It should be fun. It's not just for procreation, right? It's for enjoyment. And so I think there's a sense also we got to kind of debunk that sense of there's just kind of this boredom. There's no excitement. There's no joy in a sense. There's no sexual intimacy. Like those things should be part of marriage and pursued. Again, like you're saying, Abby, like with people's own ideas of, hey, this is what really cares for me. But again, there can be an overreaction to that even in the church as well. And there has been in the past. Mm-hmm. People just kind of indulge in that suddenly. It's like, no, that's not what we're getting at either. So I think, again, there's a lot of things to debunk myth-wise because they can kind of steer us wrong, I think, too, whether it's the culture or the church here. Yeah.
And I think that, the tendency that probably in that room amongst us is, that is like condemning sexual sin because of how terrible it is. To people's lives and everything else, but then forgetting about restoration.
That's right.
And we're a restoration shop, so we understand the process of restoration. So God says, yes, this is not the way, and Jesus says, I meant you man to a woman, and I meant that to be committed. But He also gave us a picture in the Word of the target, which is full design. And I think that's why everyone, getting back to one of your first questions, which was like, why does everyone have this? Well, you were designed to love. You were designed to be together because He said it's not good that man is apart. So then there was a design decision.
That's right.
And a design decision was made to put us with others, with man, with a woman. And then that design, when not working in that design, starts to break things down. So it's like you could have the idea, hey, engines don't need oil. I think it's really, it's really just the man trying to sell us more, oil and trying to make more money off of this. And then you start running that engine.
It's a conspiracy.
Like, man, that's getting really hot and it's not really working the way it's supposed to.
It's clanking.
Because it was designed for oil.
Right.
And it needs that oil. And so like when you get away from design, things start to break down. It's very clear in engines. It's very clear in cars. And when you're like, when you start moving away, and what the Lord, I believe, with like Song of Solomon, for instance, was showing us good design. Like here's good design. Here's like what you need to target in, maybe not the wording, it's not good for everybody, but like, but
it's like talking about your wife like a fawn.
Like, no, it's up to you. But like, but the construct of the amount of, and the feelings that were coming out of their hearts was solid. Right. And I think that's what he is kind of like, hey, this is good design. I think God puts pictures of that throughout time, either through the stories of the Bible or through Jesus or through, the Word or through our experiences, shows us possibility, right? And I think that's just important. Like, hey, you can do this. That's why, like within the car community, it's like, oh, you can run. Formula One shows us the art of possible, right? Because people are pushing to the edge to understand what is possible with vehicles, and then everyone else can dream from that state. And I think in marriage, in the same way, Song of Solomon, for instance, gives us a point and trajectory to eventually arrive at and try to strive for. And relationship with God also full of adoration.
Feel like
in the allegory, analogy. I'm not completely liking that, but I think like the target is available because of the picture that's there.
That's right.
Well, I think too about boundaries again. It's if all you're told is sex is bad, sex is bad, sex is bad. People enter into marriage, and anytime there's any kind of physical intimacy, there's shame. There is shame and regret, and people don't enjoy it because all they've been told is that it's bad and they should stay away from it. Versus it has boundaries. God has created boundaries for a reason.
Right.
In the same vein of, we don't give 10-year-olds the keys to the car.
That's correct.
Driving is not bad, but
That's right.
they need to be in the right maturity, the right age, the right size. Like,
that's right.
You know, a 5-year-old cannot reach the pedals. Like, there's so much around it, and there's boundaries, and there's structure to it, so that when they are able to, they can enjoy it in the fullest, in the safest environment possible, where they're not going to hurt themselves. They're not going to hurt others. That's the same thing. And we're okay with it with every other aspect of our lives. You know, we're okay with not giving immature people, you know, certain things, and we're okay with setting limits in all these other areas. But no, let's have free reign.
That's right.
When it comes to sex.
That's right.
Right? Like,
that's right. And it's such a reaction, you know, that it becomes an overreaction, right?
Yeah.
It's okay to react when it's wrong. It's okay to be discerning, right? But then there's a time when it becomes overreaction and an overcorrection, right? And so I think a lot of times just people need to be coached. Like I make a difference between coaching and correction. Coaching is needed for ignorance. Correction is needed for willfulness, right? So willfulness, like, you know what's right, you're doing the wrong. You need to be corrected. But if it's just ignorance, or like you don't know right from wrong, or there's a sense of like you're not used to the right, you need to be coached towards that. I think a lot of people in the church, a lot of people, particularly in the church, need to be coached towards, hey, this is what intimacy is supposed to be. You know, it's like concentric circles, like, you know, love and marriage, then sex and intimacy, but they're kind of within one another, right? And the world says, let's take that out, let's take that out, let's take that out. And like they wonder why they can't find love. You know what I mean? It's because you've broken it all, destroyed the design, right? Like, but you keep wanting it because you need it, right? So there's a sense of that's good, but you're divorcing all these things from each other, right? And the church can do the same things and has done the same things. So we have to put it back in a different way, you know, right? They think love is just this boundary, right? And so there's an overreaction to sex, there's an overreaction to intimacy, and then sometimes there's an overindulgence as a reaction to that. So it's more of the, like I said, Song of Solomon is a great book, and we're so thankful God put it in there, because he's trying to remind us, like, hey, look how these people pursued one another. Look at the way that romance progressed to marriage, progressed to sex, right? Look how it did that in the book. It literally does that through chapters 1 through 5. But then at the very end, like, as another, you know, daughter is getting ready to grow up, like, the brothers come around and say, we're going to protect her from this and protect intimacy from being awakened. So there is boundary there, but it's not like the whole time. It's not like this, we're just going to be rigid about this thing. There's a time to protect and to have boundaries, you know? And it does talk about sex and love like a fire at the end of Song of Solomon. It's more powerful than death. So that's why I think there's such an infatuation with it in the world, because it is such a powerful feeling and desire. And so desire is probably a better word for it than feeling, according to the Bible, because it's a designed desire. We want that, not because it's wrong, but because we're designed that way. It's wrong when it becomes, you know, sinful or lustful or indulgent or something like that. So I think, again, the problem comes with maybe a wrong view of what sin is. Sin is a parasite that gets in your life. You know, sin is something that is, you know, a privation of good, but it's not like sex itself or something. You know, God has created these things to be good, and sin taints them and perverts them and parasites its way. And so I think a lot of times the church has a very flat view of sin and doesn't have a very nuanced view of it. So again, I think, while the world struggles with love, sometimes the church misunderstands sin in a way that kind of gets in the way of this design of intimacy, in a sense, to keep it together. So really great discussion. Thanks for spending some time with me on that. I thought we'd finish by talking about now kind of what a healthy marriage looks like, you know, and again, this is a challenge, I know, no matter what, but healthy marriage is worth fighting for. And I thought we'd talk a little bit about what are some healthy principles to pursue about building a healthy marriage, to build up a marriage, and then finish by talking about how God values marriage and why God makes this the primary metaphor of the Bible to talk about his relationship, which is, again, really interesting given how hard marriage is. You know, he uses this as the main metaphor. So what might be some principles you all think are helpful to establish a good marriage that's loving, but built on growing, cultivating, like we've been talking about.
Yeah, I mean, and to start off, the misconception that we hear a lot is, or there's like just this assumption that if you love somebody, then marriage should be easy.
Yeah,
and
right.
the relationship
Right,
should be easy, and you shouldn't have to put any effort towards it.
Yeah,
but any good relationship has some kind of effort. Yeah. You know, the effort of learning about each other and the effort of learning how to communicate with each other. Because we train others how we can communicate with them. So if every time Joshua came up to me and I were to react a certain way, my reaction to how he's to him telling me something is eventually going to train him whether or not he feels comfortable and safe coming to me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so a lot of that, it's so cliche to say, oh, communication, but it's so key.
Yeah.
Am I being responsive to my spouse when they come to me?
Yep.
Or am I automatically putting up walls? Am I automatically yelling at them, being just arising conflict anytime anything comes up?
Yep.
Right? That I don't want to hear, or that maybe a difficult conversation. Am I avoiding everything? Or every time they come to me, whether it is good or bad, am I creating an environment where they feel comfortable enough to
approaching you,
even if it's a difficult conversation? Right?
That's really good. I mean, I think, just to reiterate what you're saying there is, one, there's this principle of saying that we have to be willing to work at it, but we have to be willing to acknowledge that it's going to take a lot of work, from us. I do think, you're kind of debunking a huge myth out there that it will be easy, that it will just kind of automatically come, that you get attracted to somebody and all of a sudden, like, now marriage works. Like, it just does not happen like that. Again, every great love story is always conflict. Every great drama has tension, has something to resolve. You never see a movie or a song that's like, and then we live. No, that's the result, the happily ever after, through the tension, the drama, the turmoil, the conflict, then the arrival there, right? So in a way, like, I'm not sure where that no challenge thing comes from, because really everyone knows it's going to take work, right? And then I love the other part you said, is that the principle of healthy, kind of accountable communication is really important, that I'm aware of my nonverbals, I'm aware if I'm accessible and I'm approachable, right? Even if it's a hard conversation, because if you don't like it, you're basically saying you're not welcome here. Right. And then that's just it's going to really hurt the marriage, even though you love each other. It's like, I can't talk to this person. So you just recognize, well, we'll have no conflict and call it a good marriage.
Yeah.
Well, you have conflict. You're just not dealing with it.
Yeah.
Right?
And then it's, oh, well, how come my spouse never talks to me? Oh, I didn't know this about my spouse.
Yeah.
And I can't trust them now because they never come to me.
Yeah. Well,
why do they never come to me?
Probably reasons why, right?
Yeah.
Whether we're aware or not, some verbal, some nonverbal. There's something that's created a barrier there that has created the communication breakdown.
Right.
Yeah.
What do you think?
So there's so many things. So I thought, what would be helpful is, let's build a car together.
Yeah.
And the car is a good structured marriage. Yeah. The frame of a vehicle is its foundation, right? So like, think of like, the metal. You start with just what metal is someone made of. And I think that process starts alone. Stripped down, it's just you. And that's character. And I think that the Lord did a lot in Abby and I. I've spent over, I was counting this morning, I'm almost coming up on 14 years of character building. And just a tremendous amount of work needed to be done on my steel. I was one of those riddled cars that comes in here with, Swiss cheese in the side. But first thing you do is you get down to what is.
That's right.
You get down to the fundamentals of what is. And as holy, not in the holy sense, but like, as riddled with rust.
The reality.
As the reality of and then you're kind of heartbroken because it's going to cost a lot more. Yeah. It took me a long time. Yeah. You have to work on the foundation, and that's character. And character development isn't fun. It's a lot of hard work. Yeah. It's not the fun stuff that you want to see and all the cool bits at the end that you're hoping that comes. but you start with the foundation of character. That's in both individuals. And that is hard work done with the Lord to unwork what the world has done to you, to get you back to good, solid steel. And then the second, I think, is the engine of the powertrain of a marriage is love. And that's what we've been spending a lot of time talking about, because we like talking about engines here. And so the power of the kingdom and the power of marriage is love. And babe, I think to kind of take a step back in our conversation, what is love? We said what it wasn't earlier on, but what is it? And I think the easiest description the Lord has given me is kind of like an outward arrow, meaning everything I'm thinking of someone else and not thinking of myself. If I'm thinking of myself, it's an inward arrow. If you add up all of the arrows throughout your day, is it more outward or is it more inward? And if you are more inward, which is how most people enter into relationships, marriage, whatever, their lives or whatever, if you're always thinking about you, you will always fail at love. But if you start learning from the Lord, who only thinks about others, he only thinks outward. That's how the Trinity work. And they've modeled that all throughout creation. Look at atoms, look how things connect. Learn about electricity. That one points to another and the other one doesn't think of themselves. It's not me that, in other words that I say are my own, but only what the Father says. You see this in the Trinity as they operate with one another. But then we also have some foundational elements that we probably need to learn. And those are the wheels and the suspension of the marriage and the things that help us get through the bumps in the roads that are really, really, really hard. And so let's go through about 4 of them that I think Abby and I have found. Abby talked about one already, communication. We call it communication without repercussion. If you can get to a point where you become unoffendable, where you can receive information and then love back to that person where you're thinking mainly about them. It's one of the things that actually saved our relationship early on. I was not great at this. Abby was, and she taught me. So that communication, we talked about that. I'll give you some other ones. There's a great book called Love and Respect. I probably can't unpack all of it here, but it's based off of a scripture that says, women submit to your husbands and men love your wives. And I think, we'll get into the love bit here in a second, but the love is really a bigger ask. And that book unpacks that quite well. And, that's another pillar, I think, of our marriage is just the men's need for respect and the women's need for love and understand what that means. I think using the cheap versions the world has given you won't encompass that. Then I think another one is, well, how do people want to be loved? And so one of the things we did early on was when we were dating, we read, the 7 love languages and understanding how are we loving this person? And am I loving them the right way? Abby early in our marriage was like, taking out the trash makes me feel like love. I'm like, really? Really? Like that was it? And it was. So I had to learn how to do things I didn't like to do. And then I would say that it needs to be put into action. So great. You've read a lot of books about marriage. You've like thought, all these other things are really helpful. You love reading. I remember a couple I met that was like, oh, we love reading. We've read all kinds of books about marriage. We're so ready. And I'm like, well, like, what are you going to do about it? Action. What are the things and structures in your marriage that make sure that thing occurs? Right? If physical touch is a love language, well, what does that mean in your marriage? Have you set a construct to do that? If it's taking out the trash, what commitment have you made to making sure that what habits are you going to build? What are the things that you're going to do that ensure that love gets transferred? Now let's get to the stuff that everybody wants to start with, which is the result. It's the stuff we see every day. It's the interior, it's the construct, it's the paint, it's all the beautiful stuff of marriage. And this is what, is the fruit of marriage if that is done right. And you listen to anybody who says a paint job is all about what you did before. It's all about the work you put in before you lay down the paint that makes it beautiful. So you want a beautiful marriage? Well, you got to do the work on the front end before you even get to the point where you can actually have a marriage. And the binding of all these things together, the full assembly of a car, when you actually pull together 2 people into a marriage, you get all the things that come up in Corinthians that people, quote at every single marriage ever. Is like love is patient, love is kind. This is the fruit of the Spirit that follows love. It is not, it helps you measure, but those are all character things. Patience is a character thing.
Yep.
Long suffering is a character thing.
Right.
Those things you want from marriage that are the beauty, the interior, the place where you live every day. You live where you need patience. You live where you need long suffering. You live where you need what's in Corinthians. But unless you have done the work to set the structure and the heart and the engine and the power of that, it will not matter how pretty the interior is if it doesn't roll. Yeah. So if you want a beautiful story, you got to do the work and you got to understand how it's built. Yeah. And that structure, just by saying, oh, it's a feeling, which is a result. It's like one of the interior items. It's like everything's about the LCDs in cars today. Not really. Like, it's okay, but that is not what makes that car great. Yeah. And so without understanding the fullness of the vehicle, you will settle for something cheaper. Yep. You'll settle for a false reality that is less than what was intended. And when all of that works together, you're going to realize that, wow, this is really, really good. And we can speak from experience. Yep. That work was worth every single moment. Yep. How hard it was, and it was hard to get. And most of that hard work, praise God, in our marriage was between us and ourselves and God helping us work through our stuff. Yeah. It has not been between each other, which is awesome. And that is not everyone's marriage story, but that's a result of doing all the underwork and the heart work well before you're trying to enjoy it.
Well, it sounds like to me, again, like just from the highlights is, the reality of work on character, the reality of investing on the stuff under the hood, the stuff behind the paint, like you're saying, like this is where really marriage is fruited, right? Mm-hmm. And enjoyed and flourished, right? But it takes so much investment, right? Yeah. It takes so much work. And I think, again, the way the culture misses it is that they say it's going to be a shortcut. You're going to get all this if you just have sex, or you're going to get all this if you just say, yes to somebody in marriage. Like, no. It takes a lot of character building and development, and you bring a lot of baggage of poor character, all of us do, into marriage. And the reality is we've got to work on ourselves and have, and most importantly, have God work in us and change us to become more like Christ. Because obviously the goal here is, like you said, a flourishing marriage. But the reality is we can only have that if we're selfless, right? It's really, like you're saying, is like selflessness is really the ultimate definition of love, of saying, hey, I'm going to do something for somebody without desiring some return, which is, that's a very supernatural desire. But if God has lived in us and does so, we want that. So I think there's a sense of it's going to take a lot of work and investment, a lot of character building. It's going to take really knowing each other well to love each other well. And I think that's a part sometimes that we don't spend enough time doing as a pillar of how do we grow a marriage. I need to know who this person is. Yeah. Like, I need to know how they receive love and how they don't. I'll just, in my own personal confession, like I would do tons of, I've been married going on 14 years now. Now, I would do tons of stuff for my wife, Elizabeth, in the first few years of our marriage, but it was never the thing she asked for. and like, I just would just do a bunch of stuff and be like, hey, I did all this stuff. She's like, I don't want that. Like, I need you. And it would frustrate me so much because I'm doing a lot of stuff, but I'm not learning her. I wasn't doing the things she needed. And then when she had something to request, I was too tired to do it, So there's a sense of like, you've got to learn what really loves them selflessly. And like, last night, hooked up the washer and dryer in a few minutes, whereas that would have taken me a while early on in marriage. And it's like, that communicated real love to my wife, like, wow, that was awesome. And she just lit up, when I did something as simple as that. And it was like, okay, this is great, but that's because I've learned her. And I know that she'd received that well. And I know once I got to it that she would appreciate that. But the reality is you really have to learn this person, because good intentions still don't communicate the love. It's like, I need to listen to know what loves them well and then follow through. Yeah. And I've got to do that habitually. I can't just do it like when I've got the free time and all the kids have gone to bed and I feel good about myself. It takes a lot of sacrificial moments during the day to do that well. And so I think there's a lot of work under the hood, a lot of character, but I think also just learning this person and responding well to them consistently and then following through. Like you're saying, love is very action oriented. And at some point we've got to say, I'm going to love them selflessly. I'm going to choose to love them. I'm not going to focus on me. But I think when you start to do that work, like you're saying, Josh, Abby, when you focus on those things, the flourishing of the marriage starts to show. And when when you meet a couple who's been married a long time and you're around them and you see how they love each other, there's a lot that's learned there that you don't know how they learned it, but you see how they're loving each other, and you're like, wow, that's such a great marriage. You just don't see all the work they did. You know what I mean? And like you're out, you look at a car come off the lot, like, wow, a great looking car. You didn't see all the mechanics and techs and all the money went into that.
Right.
And I think there's just this sense of like, it just happens. No, it does not. It takes so much investment. And I think that's the big part of it, the investments in different places, but it just takes so much investment. And I think that's why God uses this as the metaphor. He says, this is the metaphor of us, me and you, God's saying. He's like, and I want you to understand, think of our relationship like this. And I think that's very helpful because we are all susceptible to thinking it's like a me and Jesus thing, and it's just like a buddy thing, or he's at my disposal whenever I want, like a genie or something. And he's like, no, this is a marriage, is what he's saying. And it's very serious to God. So knowing that it's a marriage, we can finish with this, knowing that it's a marriage with God, how should that therefore parlay into how we relate to God in our marriage? Because it sounds a little strange to say that, but he's comfortable saying this is a marriage, right?
Yeah.
I think the number one thing I would just say is it has to be love from our side too. I mean, number one thing where most Christians get this wrong is they just think it's God about loving them. It's do you love God?
Inward arrow.
That's right. It's like, do you love Him?
Right.
And I think the thing I would say to our listeners who are not Christians is the question of the Bible is not, does God love you? He does very much love you. And He's so clear about that. But He's asking, do you love me in the Bible? And I think that's, as Christians, we got to be like, do I? And if I do, how am I showing that? So I think, how can we parlay this idea of, man, it takes a lot of investment into this marriage with God? And we can kind of finish up with that today. What do you all think?
Yeah. I mean, I do think it's interesting that, Christ is the groom.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That we are married. And I think it helps when you view your relationship with God as in that light, as a marriage. And then you are looking at an earthly marriage and being like, okay, well, that's the ideal.
Yeah.
And how can I mirror that and those characteristics into an earthly thing? It's like the communication without repercussion. It's not what you communicate with me does not have repercussions, right? It's that you can come to me and I'm here and I'm listening to you, right? Not that it's like we go to God, no matter what we've done, no matter how we're feeling, we can still come to Him and know that every single time He will be there, even though, like, okay, if I come and I have totally, my life is a total mess, I've totally wrecked my life. Okay, part of that may have consequences, right? But I can still come to Him every single time.
And He's already bore it.
Yeah.
So when he bore it already for us, which is kind of like when we have those conversations, you're going to bear a lot of hurt at that time when you're receiving that information. It's what you do with it. And what Jesus did with it is a great, I will bear this so that we may have love. Right. And that's kind of the story there. And I think also all the things that I mentioned about work needs to be done. Every time I sit with God, I understand how much He loves me. And one thing He told me that was really helpful, but it's also very hard, was like, I don't need you to have love towards God, which would be like a moment or an instance, or I felt it at church camp when I was a kid. I need you to become love. And that is a life journey. When I heard that the first time, I was like, whoa, I am insufficient. And this is when, all the prophets, when they go to heaven, they fall face down, flat on the ground, when they're exposed to the love of God, of them being so insufficient to the glory that is before us. He has just mastered this.
Yeah.
And every time I talk to the master of love, I feel insufficient. And I think what that does is means I need to go back to the character camp, and I need to spend some time there. And I need to keep spending time there.
I think it's an act of humility too.
Yeah.
When all we focus on is God is love, God loves me, God loves me, it gives us this air of, well, of course he loves me.
Yeah.
I am worthy of all this love, and I deserve to be loved.
Yeah.
When do we?
Yeah.
Do we? I mean, no, we are dogs.
Yep.
And he is gracious to give us crumbs.
Yep.
Right? Like, we should be happy with the crumbs.
Yep.
But he doesn't just give us crumbs.
That's right.
Right?
He gives us so much more, but yet we approach
deserve.
it. That's right. What
right?
we deserve. That's right.
It's like, this is what we are, but we think
we're so much more because of
more.
ourselves instead of how God esteems us. And I love how you all both put that together, because I think, again, there's this sense of entitlement that comes from understanding God's love for us that can be wrong. But when we really receive it, knowing where we really have He's taken us from, suddenly it becomes, oh, I want to be the best spouse I can be, God, for you. And there's days that I fall so short of that. But the reality is, like, I do want that. And that's why the promise of Jeremiah says, I'm going to put my spirit in your heart. You're going to want to obey my law. So here's what I'm trying to get across at the very end. If we do love God, it shows that we do want to be His spouse. He's not making a harlot for heaven. He's not saying, hey, you can go be a harlot. No. He put His spirit in your heart. So you're going to want to be His wife. You're going to want to obey Him. You're going to want to, you're not going to always do it well. But there's this desire, I want to be faithful to my God. I want to love Him back. And the Lord says that's fit for a house together in heaven. That's going to make a suitable marriage. So I think, again, marriage is so important to Christians because it's important of all sorts of civil things and whatnot. But ultimately, it defines how God relates to us and how we're to relate to Him. And it's to be this really cultivated, loving relationship that took all sorts of work. And we got a lot of work too, but he did all the work on the cross. And we see how invested God is with us. Well, thanks so much for listening in this morning. And thanks again for the great discussion. Joshua, Abigail, thanks for joining us. This has been a wonderful, challenging discussion, but I think a needed one to talk about love and marriage and how God wants us to keep that together. And that theme of really investment and working and to cultivate character and marriage is I think, the constant that we talked about today with a good, flourishing marriage. So I hope you'll like and subscribe to the podcast, and you'll also leave a comment and any questions that you have. And if you have any inquiries, just jump on crossautomotive.royale.com to look and see if we've got partner opportunities for you, as well as business inquiries as well. So until next episode, signing off.